This is the Propcast, and I'm Louisa Dickins. Before we introduce our guest, here's a quick word from our sponsor.
Hi, I'm Leon Cantor from Future Place, organisers of the largest tech and innovation event for real estate in Australasia, the Real Estate Innovation Festival, taking place from 9th to 10th of November in Sydney. For more information, please visit realestateinnovationfestival.com.
Today on the Propcast, we will be joined by Heinz's senior leaders, Peter Epping, Global Head of ESG, and Kathryn Scheckel, Managing Director of Strategic Projects and the Interim Head of Innovation. And we'll be discussing what investment managers' plan for our planet looks like. So welcome to the show, Kathryn and Peter.
Lou, thanks so much. It's so great to be with all of you. I'm Kathryn Scheckel. I'm based in New York City and lead our innovation platform.
Hi, Lou. A real pleasure to be here. Peter Epping, I'm Global Head for ESG for Heinz and based in London.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you for joining me. Everyone listening in, they are actually a large Heinz conference, about 400 people, and they rushed off stage to come join me sort of recording the podcast. So big thanks to them, and shout out as well to all the Heinz team who hopefully will listen to this after. But what we will be talking about, which I'm sure lots of the audience want to hear about, first, obviously their careers to ESG and innovation, what their Heinz's strategy to net zero by 2040 is, and obviously how they're going to get there. What is their big plan to ensure a brighter future for our planet, which is obviously a number one on everyone's agendas. Now, they're going to share with us some of the innovation that they're going through, whether it's looking at renewable energy, carbon capture, which obviously everyone's talking about at the moment, and how are they actually going to reduce general energy demand through sort of operational efficiency in Heinz's vast portfolio, which I think is something like it's worth over $90 billion US. It's within, I think, Peter, do you say it's within 28 countries? And how many cities did you say before we hopped on?
Yeah, it's 285 cities in those 28 countries. And it's in all four big sectors of the industry. So office, residential, retail, and industrial as well. Yeah.
So as we sort of said, without saying too much of an operational nightmare, but they've got a strategy in place and they've got some credible technologies that are implementing. But we're going to hear more about this in a moment. So I thought we start off, Kathryn, why don't you share with our audience a bit more about how you got to this role within Heinz? Obviously, you're in the strategic products side, but also leading that innovation platform.
Well, so I joined Heinz 3 years ago. Prior to joining the firm, I was in management consulting at McKinsey. And prior to that, I really started my career in the foundational years of my starting work world in the most innovative university in the country, ranked in that manner by U.S. News and World Report in the U.S. called Arizona State University, under the leadership of Dr. Michael Crow, who's been the president for the last 20 years. It was really the foundational underpinning for me that really drove my interest in innovation, unique ecosystems and enterprises that drive different types of solutions. That has been a common theme along with strategy in my career. After leading a strategic partnership between Starbucks and Arizona State University, among a variety of other initiatives, I left, joined McKinsey, and gained a broad exposure to a variety of sectors, including real estate, and really fell in love with the global challenges that face the built environment and the ability for a firm like Heinz, which I was lucky enough to find and join back in 2019, is really working to tackle and solve with all of the many talented individuals that work within the firm and all of our many partners. When I first joined the firm, I started in our investment management platform in a chief of staff capacity, helping drive forward some change happening within the IM team. From there, I started this cross-functional team called Strategic Projects, which really sits internally and focuses on helping cross-functional initiatives within the firm and our overall governance. And it's really a pleasure for me in 2022 to be named our innovation lead and driving forward now a reimagined way that we're approaching innovation, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. But that's a little bit of my journey to Heinz.
Awesome. Thank you. And Peter, what about you? You've obviously worked across Europe, and I think you started more in, say, a portfolio role. Now you're in a global role within ESG. How did this sort of come about?
Yeah, it was a long time in the making in some ways, because some of the origins go back to my school years, where the interest in all things sustainability first emerged. But my career really started with Heinz right out of university, and the development side of the business back in Berlin and then Munich, before I worked with the company on development projects around Europe. based in London. But then really I entered the kind of investment management side of the business and became portfolio manager for some of the European funds, and eventually took on responsibility to build out our European core fund. And over time also got entrusted to build up several separate account portfolios based on strategies we had worked out with institutional investors, investing into value-add retail strategies around Europe or across sectors and more opportunistically, and also on the core side. And the route to sustainability really started at some point after the great financial crisis, when first rules and regulation came up on energy performance in Europe. And we realized that with the way we operate at Heinz, we were doing actually pretty well on all those standards. And we felt that there's a lot more we can do actually as a company. And we started collecting a significant amount of data and measure our performance, and wanted really to achieve the highest level of efficiency. And at the same time, also make our buildings as healthy as they possibly can be for the occupiers in our office or residential buildings. And that really created a very positive feedback loop with our investors. Some of our investors, especially those from the Netherlands or the Nordic countries, have been quite pioneering in this space.
Yeah.
And they have challenged even us, who at the time we felt we were doing pretty well, but they came with new ideas and requirements to lean even deeper into some of those measures. And we took that on and felt that by really leaning into that, we have to invest more, we have to spend more time of our people. But we saw that the outcomes were just significantly better. And that continued and made that feedback loop ever more positive. And it was one of the reasons that over time led me to think about going deeper into the space. At the beginning of last year, I had considered the idea of changing paths after about 10 years as a fund manager, and the sustainability side or ESG was something where I saw a huge opportunity for Heinz in general, given that we are so deeply technically integrated, meaning we do development, we manage our buildings, but we also come up with the investment strategies, we cover the whole value chain, and we do that in so many cities around the globe. And I felt that with so much experience and deep expertise, and also so much ingenuity and willingness to innovate, we have a real opportunity to take what we know and find out with each individual project, connect that, and start really building out what's often referred to as a network effect.
Obviously innovating, you mentioned about obviously the ESG side. How closely do your teams work together? Like Kathryn, do you have sort of weekly sort of meetups to exchange obviously between sort of strategy, technology? I think there's often within large businesses like Heinz or other large investment managers, there's sometimes, it can be, different time zones. It can be a bit of a nightmare. How do you guys go about this sort of open communication to make sure you're working together?
Well, if you have a soft blue or anyone listening for the time zones, we certainly don't. It is hard being a global company, but it's a fun challenge. We work extremely closely together, my team and Peter's team. And then it's really important, I think, to underscore in how we are organized. There's some critical partners within Heinz that are also just key to how we drive forward our innovation efforts and all of the strategies and solutions within the sustainability and broader ESG ecosystem. And so I think part of what you may be hearing about Heinz in the nearer term is even the closer bringing together of innovation and ESG, which we can't speak so much to today, but broadly, I think we've enjoyed always a great close collaboration, especially too with our operations and engineering personnel, which for us are really the execution and implementation arm of so many of the different strategies, so many of the different innovations that we might test or try and eventually bring to market in service of our clients.
Now, whilst we're on the topic of Heinz's strategy, talking about obviously the wider business that are coming together, Peter, you recently shared a post about Heinz's plan for our planet. Now, what is the plan? There's key points in the report of how you're going to reach net zero by, I think it's 2040. Obviously, it's through reducing energy demand through operational efficiency. That's one of the points. The other one was increasing reliance on renewable energy. Another one was advancing carbon capture. Another one was utilizing circular systems to reduce energy waste and enhance system efficiency. Now, that point I don't know too much about. Is there anything you can share with our audience about this plan and the strategy? And Kathryn, after, I'd love to obviously, how does the innovation side of it come into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I would just like to clarify one thing that often gets overlooked, but everything we do around managing our existing buildings, we are separately also looking at setting a target for the embodied carbon side of the coin, which for us as a developer is also a huge exposure. The challenge on that front is just that there are no standards yet for how you measure and how you compare it. They're currently being developed, and as soon as they're out, we will probably then set a net zero target there as well. The other aspect I would like to clarify, because it also often gets overlooked, is that the target we're setting for the year 2040 for operational emissions is without offsets and will be aligned with the Science Based Targets initiative. This is important because there is a whole lot of talk and action underway with regards to offsetting emissions and neutralizing them by investing into schemes that protect forests or potentially also capture carbon. But given that that industry is not regulated today, we feel that the additionality of those concepts is not secured. And for us, it's really important, and that is the key focus area for us, is that we're focusing on bringing down the actual emissions of our buildings. So that target that we're setting will not have any offsets. And instead, we're investing, as you rightly say, in furthering energy efficiency in our buildings. That's the first step. And that's something where we, as a property manager of assets around the world, have really very deep experience. And that's the first big step. And then it's really about electrifying buildings in a wholesale kind of way, as well as including bringing in on-site renewables or potentially off-site renewables as well. But if you want to break that down into the building level, there are a number of steps that we maybe can talk about later. The point really is thinking strategically for the size of a global portfolio is that we have established a first idea of the baseline of our emissions that we have across the globe. And now we're looking at establishing pilot projects and case studies into how quickly we can reduce those emissions for existing buildings that either are wholesale, in a wholesale way being renovated, or where you can upgrade systems even while the building is fully occupied and income producing. And those pilot projects are really instructive for us to lay out in a much wider way than how strategically we implement different ways of carbon reduction and find the pathway or align that with the pathway of 1.5 degree maximum temperature increase.
I loved when you said electrifying buildings. Now, for our sort of audience listening in, are there any, and Kathryn, this might be for you, is there any sort of technologies you could share that you're sort of looking at? Maybe you've invested in, you're piloting, this could be internally, externally, you could share with us to sort of, help with any of the points which Peter raised?
Sure. Happy to share maybe some of the themes that we're really addressing, Lou, that are technology related, and then share a bit with the viewers and listeners here about our truly customer-centric approach that we're taking within the innovation platform to solve some of the challenges that Peter is speaking into, and also just really to underscore why it's so important for Heinz that innovation and ESG cannot operate really one without the other in our view, and why we must bring the two much more closely together. So from a domain area of what we're really thinking about when it comes to sustainability, certainly all types of solutions, tools, and technologies that help support carbon tracking, carbon mitigation, and creating more positive outcomes for our communities and buildings. I won't speak specifically to technologies, but we'll share that within the innovation ecosystem now for Heinz, what we've been very intentional in the last 12 months to do is put in infrastructure within the firm really for two major components of our platform. The first piece is about corporate venture building. For us, that really does mean operating like a startup. We know not every venture that we build will have perhaps from start all the way to scale up. And so we have been working on a very disciplined process and a set of playbooks for our corporate enterprise, but pulling from the best of really Silicon Valley and others that are already leading in corporate venture, but outside of real estate, to bring those practices in house and really think about the spaces of sustainability that we think are the most pressing when we think and listen to our clients. And for Heinz, being able to listen to every perspective in the value chain of real estate by being vertically integrated, meaning we work across the life cycle of the real asset space, from buying buildings to selling to leasing to managing and so forth. And so that really gives us a unique viewpoint to hear what pains really those that are our end consumers are experiencing. And of course, the broader ecosystem we know we're all operating in with the challenges that climate presents for us. The other part of the innovation platform that is getting spun up still, and again, we'll love to tell you more in due course here, but we're building out our own partnerships and investments arm that will really allow us, we think, to move faster across the spectrum, not only of building, but also potentially buying in the right way and in a measured way, partnering more deeply and investing in strategic areas that relate to not only sustainability as really the outsized pillar of where we're focusing, but also other domains, including digitization, client centricity more broadly, as we think about the experience moving from B to B and really B to B to C. And then the last piece of our pillars are really around, and what we've called our disruption agenda, new products and more agile product launching. And that might be the physical product. It might also be virtual products for us. So how we've organized is to tackle things that our core business, already Heinz has a tremendous playbook and history of innovation. And what our function is doing from the center of the firm alongside ESG is having a bit of freedom and also manage processes to think about more disruptive innovation that is sitting a few years out potentially on the horizon, or areas where the core business is focused on a day-to-day challenge and just does not have the time or the resources to interrogate more deeply. So that is how we think we can start to really unlock some of the value along the problem statements and opportunity areas that Peter has articulated for sustainability as an example.
I bet with your portfolio and investors being so global, what they're sort of wanting probably changes quite dramatically. So how you adapt this sort of plan or find these technologies internally externally must change a lot, especially year by year. I've got a big question. We keep speaking about your vast portfolio and different investors. Now, obviously it's across the Americas, Europe, Asia Pacific. You've both been in this space for a lot. I'm sure our audience, and I know I definitely would, like to hear a bit more about sort of major trends you've observed when it comes down to obviously the innovation side, digital transformation, but as well as within sort of ESG. Peter, you touched upon obviously the Nordics maybe being slightly more ahead or proactive. I'm going to be careful what I say here. I think it's a general consensus that they are slightly further ahead. What are the major sort of trends you've observed? Peter, if you want to sort of go first, more, I guess, totally to the ESG side, we'd love to hear it.
What we are witnessing there, and it's a timely question actually, because Kathryn and I spent a week in Copenhagen last week, kind of doing workshops with our teams and meeting a number of parties. But we have a business in the Nordics anyway, and we've partnered a lot with companies based there, even for projects in New York and elsewhere, because we're seeing that they have grown expertise in the area of heat pumps and renewable energy for the last 40 years. They've decided much earlier than the rest of the world that they wanted to get off fossil fuels. And so it's all more developed over there. And we're seeing that in general, they have a very open mindset to innovation and to doing things differently. And we find that is extremely helpful and refreshing, and then allows you really to change systems, building technologies, which is an industry that is extremely ingrained and has grown and is very capital intensive, and therefore has structures that are much harder to change than in other industries. But we're seeing also that it works, and we're under construction with a new development in Lower Manhattan on Greenwich Street, where we're applying the same ideas and concepts that people use in the Nordic countries all the time, And the result is really an all-electric building that is not only will it be net zero eventually once the New York grid is zero as well, but it's also overall has a much better comfort for the tenants. It saves almost 1 million gallons of water a year. So you arrive at a product that is overall better for everyone, and all is coming back to the fact that you just pick the best expertise from different places around the world and manage to somehow overcome the inertia and resistance that invariably you will find if you want to implement that out.
There's, I guess, across different geographies, there's obviously different cultures, but it's probably unanimous about what people do want in a building. Maybe I'm naive saying this, but I definitely think the world, or whether it's Gen Zs or Gen Zs, millennials, moving forward, what they actually look for when, say, if you, as obviously when I'm talking to candidates, and I said this in another podcast, people are a lot more sort of conscious about stuff like that, about what sort of building they're working with or what sort of business they're working with, whether it's sort of a healthy building or it's an impact business. So there's definite move towards that globally and what sort of people want. When people started using the word healthy building, I think people started using it sort of during COVID, and no one quite knew what that sort of meant. But there's definitely been a whole move globally towards it, and people understanding what it means, importance. Kathryn, what about on the Peter's obviously been a lot more specific to issue. What about Kathryn, you've through your times at McKinsey to obviously being a lot more obviously focusing on the innovation side of the platform at Hines, from obviously more on the invest side. What have you sort of seen? And so you made the pivot as well yourself to sort of refocus too. So love to hear from you.
Sure. I think picking up, Lou, on questions that, are applicable really across geography, one area, no surprise, that we're really spending a lot of time on within the innovation structure, but also with deep partnership with our regional platforms in the US and broader North America regions, as well as and South America too, frankly, and then into Europe and Asia, is the concept of flexibility and what are tenants really demanding, especially in a post-COVID world. We don't have all the answers, but one particular new venture that I can certainly share with you and with the listeners here is a venture that we've called Halo. We might change the name, but Halo is really meant to be a software play to support broader flexibility options in the office domain and support what we're hearing a lot from tenants, whether they're ours or more broadly in the ecosystem, of tenants really wanting flexibility both on lease length terms as well as readiness of space to move in, really much more quickly than the traditional leasing process may allow for. We are piloting and testing rigorously with our playbooks that I talked about in our venture practice within the innovation platform, and partnering a lot with our regional teams, focusing first in the US. But I will say this is a broad area. We also have a flexible workplace product called the Square, which is the hardware, if you will, that offers much more flexible types of officing and space that continues to grow and sits within what Heinz calls our management services vertical. So one domain, that we're really seeing is flexibility. I think that trend is something certainly in the last years, it's only ever more accelerated with COVID. And another space certainly within digital that is inextricably linked for us to, is really the concept of data, and not to be vague intentionally, but, all the types of data that are coming out of our building systems, the ways in which we can connect back to data. We have at Hines a team called the Global Digital Strategy Office that really thinks deeply about that data, which we're so lucky to have such a group that with innovation, we can together and alongside ESG think about what are the best ways to use some of that data in ways that help solve other pain points for clients. So I think just data and the increasing volume of it and getting even smarter data across our buildings is another big domain and area for the firm broadly, but one that sits much more near term to the today business. I'll touch on things that I'm sure, again, everyone's reading the headlines. We think there's some interesting plays maybe in, let's see, but in the metaverse and tokenization, picking up on the demographic shifts that are happening globally in different ways and times. I'll stay intentionally high level today, Lou, but would love to update you as we continue to think about the solutions in those domains too, alongside, again, ESG really as our kind of crown focus.
Yeah, you mentioned obviously about the increase, obviously, in the sort of data digitalizations inside of it. I'm sure most of these businesses and the real estate side just sort of hiring them. We saw last year, I think it was something like a 45% increase in data hires across business analysts, research analysts, technical, anything to do with data, machine learning. the importance of it and how they sit aside these, these other teams, and the beginning of that communication, I'm sure must be a different conversation they used to be having about the importance of it and what then they can do with it and how it implicates every single business. I would love to actually be a fly on the wall in the first conversations when they're like, so this is the data team, this is what they're going to be doing, this is what we're going to be showing you, and this is all the issues we've had from not understanding what the data of our buildings is.
We've come to the LMRE part now, but first, here's a word from our sponsor.
With inflation at its highest since 1982, we want to make sure that both our clients and candidates are prepared for a shift in the PropTech market. A huge advantage of our consultants being 360-degree PropTech recruiters means that we can communicate regularly on both sides of the business. Our job is to make both the hiring process easier for clients and the job searching process easier for candidates. In short, a recession can be intimidating, unpredictable, and tumultuous. But it doesn't need to be. We at LMRE are here to help. Head to our website, lmre.tech, and we can find the right talent for your company's needs.
Now, look, I'm really conscious of time because you guys have just come off stage and you need to go and enjoy yourself and do team building with your 400 people who've just been listening to you on stage. But how we finish, and we'll make it really quick, it's the final part, it's the LMRE part, and I will direct each one at one of you. So ours, what's one of the main lessons you've learned throughout your career? And Kathryn, I'd love to direct that one at you.
I think the key lesson I have learned and continue to learn every day is that there is no single person in a team, however cheesy or cliche that may sound, and really the power and the force of networks, partnerships, internal to a firm you may be at, external, and really the broader ecosystem one is operating in is just crucial. So I think building up a network and a set of resources and partners to really help is crucial. So that's certainly lesson number one for me, that I continue to learn and reinforce on a daily basis. And two, having a learning mindset is so critical. The world is changing ever more fast. My background is in education. I was not an educator, but rather in the strategic leadership side when I started at the university at Arizona State University. But ever more, I think this capacity for us to absorb information, it's flying so much faster at us anyway. The world is changing quickly, and having the curiosity and staying open to knowing what you don't know is crucial. So for my two nuggets, Lou, for you.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Now, Peter, okay, so Emma's where you can sort of give a mention to someone, a product, a service, a shout out. So who's that going to be?
Well, I do continuously applaud my colleagues who are running the European Core Fund, which I used to manage, but how they're taking everything forward, how they're managing to implement what we want to do across the whole firm in such a coherent, consistent, and fast way is really impressive to me. And I haven't seen any company or fund that is as far advanced as them. But then, I think in this whole arena, it's really important to stay humble and look around and collaborate. And for me, it's a shout out to the industry as well and to the leaders in the industry, some of our peers in Europe and the US, who are being very open and collaborative. And it is really extremely refreshing, this mindset of just open books that we're seeing, and how the smart people in the industry are realizing that, yes, there's money to be earned with this if you do it right. But more importantly than that, is it doesn't help us if we as a company, if Heinz solves this problem and has a net zero portfolio, if everyone else is 10 or 20 years behind us. We need to solve this collectively and need to change the systems, how our economies work, how the real estate industry works. And the spirit of having realized that and willing to collaborate is really, in the literal sense, energizing.
Yeah, I agree with that. It obviously goes back to the point you made earlier as well, is obviously learning from other geographies as well, and the advancements which they're sort of making as well, the collaboration, the partnerships, the common themes we keep, all of us we keep talking about, are sort of integral to us sort of reaching net zero. Kathryn, what's been the most rewarding part of working within the innovation side of real estate?
I'll pull on the partner theme further and just say getting to meet and get exposure to so many different types of areas that I think if you look 10 years ago, one would say, well, gosh, how does that have anything to do with real estate? So I think the ever more convergence, not only of our product types, but of the industry more broadly, and the built environment that we all are a part of and live within, and that surrounds us, the convergence of different industries caring about our industry, and the reciprocal being true, just getting to speak to different types of scientists, engineers, partners that I think, again, if you look backwards in time, would maybe not be true. And I'm excited for what's ahead in the next decade of different types of very smart and different types of domains may come up, and different types of partners will attract.
Amazing. We kind of answered the last question, which was what are you most excited about? So Peter, finish us off. What are you most excited about in terms of the future, what we've got coming?
Well, I'm super excited about the fact what's already possible today, what we're seeing, like where we can get emissions out of some of our buildings already within the space of the next couple of years cases. And I'm really excited about seeing how much opportunity there is, how financially this works in many cases, not always, but in many, because that ultimately will be the biggest catalyst for making this all happen. As much as we know regulation will probably play an important part in all of this, but the financial viability will be more powerful and will be convincing even in those countries or industries where there's more skepticism.
Agreed. And this all ties into literally the podcast, which I recently recorded last week, and lots of these will. And everyone listening in, you will see why they've been set up the way they have. And look, Peter and Kathryn, thank you both so much for joining the Propcast, sharing your insights, and obviously your plan to net zero and the different parts and potential misunderstandings of what it actually means as well to sort of get there, and metrics. Looking forward to catching up with you both after the show. But thank you again.
Thank you so much for having us, Lou. It's been a pleasure.
Lou. Great to be with you. Thanks.
Making a high-quality podcast like this one takes a lot of work. That's a fact. But not when you hire a podcast company. With our white glove experience, we handle everything for you. From guest outreach all the way through to publishing and promotion, we handle it all. You show up to hold great interviews and build relationships with your guests, and we take care of everything else. Podcasting is not just about the audience. Every podcast interview is the start of a new relationship. With a weekly podcast, you'd build relationships with 52 ideal partners or prospects through your podcast interviews over the next 12 months. Do you believe that 52 new relationships would help grow your business? We do. Contact Jason at apodcastcompany.com and let's talk.